Lights are flashing, hearts are falling. Join the wave, come feel the motion. Dive into this fringe devotion. Stories told and laughter shared. Every stage shows how we care. Dreamers rising.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So, this podcast has been going on for 5 years, over 100 episodes, 3 virtual fringes, and tonight I am finally able to say these words. Welcome to this podcast is uncalled for live at KC Fringe. My name is Mike Cherniewski. I'll be your host for this evening. Joining me on stage tonight is my co-host, Heather Marie.
Yes, sir. Heather Marie. I'm very glad to be here tonight.
And let's bring on our guest for this evening.
Yes.
Please do the honors.
Please. Well, this evening we have the one and the only Meghan Spencer. You look so amazing in red.
All right. Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, my name is Meghan Spencer. I am a professional aerialist, dancer, and aerial coach, and director of education at a circus school here in Kansas City. And that's kind of my
That's amazing.
that's my full-time gig. But in all ways, I'm just kind of a performer and an artist and all those things.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, we're glad to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
Yep.
So this evening, I was kind of getting ready, figuring out what, and I said, Megan, what are you going to wear tonight? And Megan was like, I don't know, does it matter? I was like, God, no, it doesn't matter. But this is what I'm going to wear. And she said, I may wear the red suit. And can we just have a round of applause for the red suit, please? You look absolutely stunning tonight. I'm so thankful for you to come in. And so Megan, we've known each other really only a short while. Also.
About a year.
It's gone by
Isn't that
fast.
crazy? Yeah, it's been about a year.
It has been about a year.
Yeah. Last August.
Oh, it was last August that we auditioned together for the American Immersion Theater for the Murder Mystery Dinners.
Yeah.
And I have gotten to hear little bits about your story, but I'm so thankful and so excited to hear tonight. So, how did you get into being an aerialist? Like, what does that journey look like?
Okay, I'm gonna give you the long story longer.
I love it. I love it.
Just because this seems like the right format for that. So, when I was about 4, I started dance, which is common, right? Little girls start dance around that age. I started with just tap, because at the studio that I was taking at, tap was the first class you take, because the teacher thought that like little kids do better with something that they can hear.
Sure.
Right? They can hear. It's not just about where do you put your body, but there's like sound involved. Yeah. So I started with tap, and at the same time I started like a basic gymnastics class. And at the end of that year, I told my mom, I was like, I want to do more dance. I want to do more dance. And she's like, well, Megan, you can't do more dance and gymnastics. And I don't remember this conversation, but from what I understand, I basically told her, screw that gymnastics business. Like, I don't want that. Please take it away from me.
I know where my heart is right now.
Which is interesting with where my life ends up. But so I took lots and lots of dance classes as a kid. And then I also got super involved in other performing arts. Started piano at 4, cello and trumpet in like 5th grade.
Wow.
I started playing the bagpipes in 6th grade.
Wow.
So like lots and lots of performing arts, all that good stuff. Then fast forward a little bit to high school. And about that age, in dance, I was competing every weekend, doing the whole competitive dancer life. And my teachers, not in so many words, made it clear to me I would never dance professionally. And so I was like, cool, all right, that's fine. I'm going to go do other stuff. So I quit dance and went and did theater and show choir and marching band and was in 7 music ensembles at one point, and just like did everything in high school I could get my hands on that was performance based. And I just got really lucky that my high school in Nebraska had a really wonderful theater department that's like nationally recognized, and I got a really amazing education in all these little pieces of performing arts.
Yeah.
And then played trumpet all the way through college, in marching band, and then I left college, and every performance opportunity available to me just like went up in smoke. Because they're all tied to school a lot of the time, right? And childhood and all of those things. And so as an adult, unless I was doing community theater, which I did a little bit of, but there weren't a ton of opportunities where I was. And so I, like, for a hot second was like, maybe I'll teach Zumba, or I don't know, like, and I didn't really understand why I needed it so badly. And then when I moved to Kansas City, I had a coworker that knew I danced as a kid and had taken a couple of aerial classes and was like, "Oh my gosh, I think you'd really, really enjoy this thing." And I found it and fell in love immediately. And it went from, I always say it's one reasonable goal after another.
I love that.
Because it seems to other people that the fact that I became a circus artist at 32 is like completely crazy. But for me, it felt like, okay, I started, and then that's awesome. Maybe if I work super hard, I might get to perform again someday. And for me, that was like at the student showcase at the studio, right? So I did that. And then I auditioned for our student company. And then I became an apprentice in our student company. And then I became a coach and a staff member. And then I became a professional member. And then I got the job as the director of education. So like, and each one of those things at the time felt like reasonable next steps. So like, yes, when you look at it, it looks crazy. But that's just how it went, is like just one next reasonable goal after another. And it was the fall of 2019, I believe. And I was doing a contract where I got to like be a fairy in the woods, basically.
Amazing.
Because my life is wild and I do all sorts of odd things.
That's a bucket list item. Fairy in the woods is a bucket list item.
Yeah, getting paid to be a fairy in the woods is pretty wonderful. And I remember being like, this was what I was meant to do with my life. This right here. So I just kept pushing, kept fighting, kept digging and diving and all the things until I made it happen.
And now, so I've learned one serious lesson, which is that we need to have better pre-interview inquiries.
Okay.
I would have had a trumpet. I would have had a trumpet here tonight.
I haven't played in so long. Besides, I go back once every few years for the alumni band at the University of Nebraska. And so I could probably play the fight song, and that would be the extent of what I still could play.
We would. I believe that we would all have loved that. I should have. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We would have loved to see the trumpet playing.
Oh Lord.
So, Mike, what do you think about the aerialist journey?
That's interesting stuff. I don't get to meet many aerialists, you know. So, what all is entailed, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. So, in terms of what I like, my day-to-day like work life, what that looks like, primarily my major part of my like work life and my income comes from coaching. So I teach classes at Kansas City Aerial Arts, which is based in Leawood. And so I teach a plethora of classes, everywhere from our beginning aerial classes, which is when someone comes in off the street, has never touched an apparatus before. Some people have some sort of backgrounds like mine, dance, gymnastics, things like that. But some people have literally the question I always ask is, what's your movement background? Because sometimes it's sports, sometimes it's whatever.
Yeah.
And sometimes
like that.
I get nothing ever. I'm like, cool, we got you. And so I teach those students like how, to understand their bodies, how to start doing the thing safely, all the way up to some of our advanced classes. So I do that in the evenings, primarily during the week, because that's when our clients are available.
Sure.
And then I train myself, normally in the afternoons before I teach most of the time. And then depending on the season, I'm performing all over the place. Like I have a big gig on Monday. Mondays are not normal, but like, okay, whatever. A lot of Fridays and Saturdays, things like that. And my performances can be anything from immersive events, or we do a lot of corporate events as well, especially in the holiday season. Sometimes we do what we call ambient, which is essentially I'm an ornament for an hour, which I love.
Sorry, it cut off on me.
No, you're good.
All right. Let's go back to the last question, please.
Well, so you just described that occasionally at corporate events, you are hired to be an ornament, ostensibly.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell me what that is and how that works.
So at those corporate parties, they like us to just be, normally during like a cocktail hour, something like that, where people aren't necessarily going to sit down and stare at me for the amount of time that I'm in the air.
Right, like a stage.
Yeah,
necessarily.
or they need entertainment for 2 hours or something like that. Normally, there's myself and other aerialists that will take turns, normally about 10 minutes apiece, and we just sit and look pretty for 10 minutes.
In film, we call that being an extra.
I like to be called an ornament, right? Because like it's like sparkly and we're spinning, and it depends upon the event. Sometimes those ambient scents I work a little harder to like pull out harder tricks. It kind of depends honestly on how much people are paying attention.
Sure.
If people are paying more attention, I work harder.
Sure.
If they're not, then I literally will just like sit there and smile and make pretty arms and like be like, okay, well,
like
that's
that.
fine.
I mean, an ornament.
I look gorgeous, so you can look at me or not. It's fine.
And so an ornament is intended to kind of accentuate and to add.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of wanting to be an ornament.
It's not
That's
for everybody, and there's some aerialists that don't like that work, but I don't mind. I don't mind looking pretty and getting paid.
I wouldn't mind that either. It sounds well, and just being. So it's all about like kind of like culture and space, right? And so I like the idea of having that human interaction, and a big part of what I like, and in the way that we met doing trying out or auditioning to participate in murder mystery dinners, and it's an immersion theater experience. So instead of being on a stage, we go out into the audience and we portray a character, and we get to bring the audience into this world of play. And as adults, we've kind of lost our sense of play in so many ways. And what you do is you bring people into that world of play, and I just think that that's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, I love.
Right? Yes, like that's what it was. It's amazing.
I talk to my students a lot because one of my favorite classes to teach is an act development class, where my job is to help the students understand what making an ideal act looks like what goes into that, choosing music, choosing the right skills, putting them in the right order, like all the things that go into making that act. I help kind of guide not only the process of doing it, but teaching them and giving them the tools to do it themselves. And something that we talk about a lot, or I like to remind them, is that your job is to be entertaining, right? And I had an experience in a show a handful of years ago that was about a very, very heavy topic. And I am not against shows that are about heavy topics, but it was a learning experience for me because I love telling emotional stories. That is my bread and butter. I am extraordinarily good at making people cry. But I like doing it within the confines of an experience where someone gets to walk out feeling entertained. Example, I did a show this last fall about the Titanic. Most of the show was like fun and light and funny and like whatever. And then I portrayed water and death. So I was the part of the show that made everyone sad. And then we finished it off with like fun and light and whatever, right? So like at the end of the day, I want to be a part of productions or shows or interactive events or whatever that people leave feeling entertained.
Feeling something, right? I love that.
Yeah, and it's not just about like, you know, having like that's a cool thing that I saw, but like I want them to leave feeling entertained, feeling happy, feeling
You want to create
something.
an experience
Yeah.
versus just a show.
Yeah.
You want them to leave with an experience.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, you can relate to having to orchestrate a show and a production and music and
We're doing it right now. But yes, I'm a filmmaker, so I know all that jazz and everything. There's a lot of stuff that goes into, you know, pre-production, making sure we have a script, making sure we have the right people, both acting and on the crew and everything. Make sure we have the right locations, studio space, you know, all that good stuff, and then we actually get to shoot it, and then the fun starts with the post-production.
Yeah, it's I as of 6 months ago, I think, started actually directing circus projects and being the director on some of these events that we're doing.
Wow.
And oh boy, is that a whole different bag of cats.
bag of cats.
When I got given my first project, my boss, he was telling me about this project, and for it to be the first one, it was kind of intense. It was a 12-minute halftime show for a lacrosse game in Canada on New Year's Eve.
Wow.
And the director that was supposed to do it couldn't do it last minute. I had 3 weeks to make that show. So I was sitting in the office being like, and I was like, I think I can do this. Yeah, I think I can do this. And he looked at me and he said, I have watched you do it on a smaller scale for years.
That's nice
Because
to
I
have people
do
that
it in
see you
those,
that way.
right? I do it in I've built acts in shows. I've built, you know, and so I said, okay. And so now, that was a really big project. I also directed a project called Life Like Water at KU in the spring, which was about fully choreographed, conceptualized with the dancers from KU and our professional aerialists.
Oh, wow.
Which was about the way that we move through the world and are forced to move through the world and how that's mimicked in the way that water moves. And that was a really lovely experience. And hopefully, because it was a short show, it was about 15 minutes, and I'm hoping to actually eventually make that into a full-length production. That's a long-term project. And then I just did a show with like 40 performers that performed in front of 10,000 here in Kansas City, like
Oh my
a couple of months ago. So getting to take all of these things I already know, and then add all of those other layers of like organizing everything and making sure everyone is where they need to be at the same time. And watching that big show in front of 10,000 was wild because I stood in the sound booth and was just like seeing 10,000 children screaming and watching all of this happen in front of me. And it was unbelievable to like watch it come to life. And like see the thing that was in my head that actually happened.
Yes.
Which was
Like to see it come to fruition.
yeah, it was
like that's amazing.
It was mind blowing. But it's been a really fun way of taking the things I'm passionate about in performance and art and entertainment and just like take them to the next level and put them on my students and put them on my colleagues and like all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's been the new project, which has been super fun too.
Good deal.
If somebody didn't know what an aerialist is, how would you, if you were to paint
So
a
when
picture?
I say I'm a professional aerialist for a living, and someone says I don't know what that means, I say Cirque du Soleil, but
okay.
in Kansas City,
I like that. I like
which is not like wrong.
No, absolutely. Like
Cirque-
they're aerialists
yeah,
in Cirque du Soleil.
Cirque du Soleil
absolutely.
is a circus company, and actually is one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world. And so but that's what people think of, right? Is that they think of the aerialists, and they're like, you fly around on the curtain things, and I'm like, those are called silks. Can
I was going to ask, so what
Can
are they
I?
called? Yeah.
Yes. Not my primary apparatus, but I do perform on them sometimes. Yes.
What's your primary apparatus?
The lyra, which is essentially a steel ring.
Okay.
Mine is it's a 34-inch diameter, and it's made of steel. You can have mine is hollow steel because I like the ways I can manipulate it. You can also have it sand-filled or solid steel. And then it is attached in a myriad of ways to the ceiling, and then I hang on it and spin in it and do crazy things.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's my primary apparatus, but I consider myself to be what we call in the industry a generalist, which means I can pretty much do something on every single apparatus that exists to some capacity.
What was your first apparatus?
The first one I touched was silks, but I didn't. Silks is the hardest at the beginning. When you start, you primarily start with the basic three, which are silks, lyra, and then trapeze, which is exactly what you think it is. It just doesn't swing most of the time. And of those three, silks is the hardest when you start because it requires the most knowledge and strength to like do anything. Whereas with lyra, because I started that almost immediately after, and I was like, wait, I can just sit on this and look pretty? No, I picked this one.
It makes sense though. Because like a hoop or like a firm form.
Getting to sit on it
Yes,
makes it
there
extremely
creates-
easier.
yes,
Now,
versus-
and once you get to advanced levels, they're all just hard. They're all just hard in their own way, so there really isn't like which one's the easiest. But when you start,
Yeah, learning how to create
Yeah,
your own
lyra is
leverage
the
points on the silks it just seems logistically like that.
yeah, you just have to be able to hold yourself up long enough for your feet
While
to figure
learning
it
how
out.
to do things and not. So is it scary being up high? Like you go up high, I imagine.
It depends upon the person. Some people it bothers more than others. We like to talk about learning low and slow. So most of the time when I'm training, my apparatus is only a couple feet off the ground. We also use a lot of mats. Like our professionals use mats until we're ready to not have a mat anymore. I'm going to be performing next week in Union Station, probably at 30 feet, I think.
Wow.
But I have done all these skills so many times. Like you don't go that high until you know exactly what you're doing. I could do it blindfolded and be fine. Because I perform on my own apparatus. That's why I don't perform on other lyras. I know mine. I know how much it weighs. I know how big it is. And so I know exactly how it's going to move around me. So we don't go super high until we're really, really safe and ready to do that. Does that mean I don't still have some fear? No. Like for that Canada contract, that was the highest I'd ever been. And I had one transition in that act that I had done hundreds of times, hands-free, and I self-spotted it every time until the actual show. Because I was just like a little nervous with this. So yeah, there's still fear, but that's just part of the game. And understanding, it's the same as like, you get butterflies when you walk out on stage, right?
Yeah.
So there's always a little bit of fear, and understanding how to not control that, understand it,
Mitigate
feel
it,
it,
yeah.
but not let it control you and control your performance. It's just part of the game.
So this weekend you will be in Union Station 30 feet in the air on your lyra. Okay. And is this like an open to the public show?
No,
Like
it's a
people
corporate
could-
event.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know, we were trying.
I know.
Yeah,
It's hard. It's really hard, and it's hard for my friends and family too, because like I don't actually have that many public shows.
It's very different. I'm like, I can relate to, but like with the American Emergent
Yeah.
Theater,
Yeah.
like my dear friends who are with us this evening have been like, when can I come see you? And I was like, well, I don't know. join the elk club. I don't know if I can send
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, that's awesome. So you started out with silks briefly, and then went into lyra, and now you have your own lyra. Is it common for people to own their own apparatus?
Most professionals do. Yeah. Just because then you get to be really picky about what all the different pieces of that. I'm about to buy a piece of equipment that like is still kind of new in our industry, but is really going to work well for what I want and what I need and how I move. So really understanding like what you specifically want for your work, yes. It is extremely common these days for people who don't know what they're doing to buy equipment off the internet and rig it from things they shouldn't be rigging it from. So if I can get on my soapbox for just a moment.
Wait, do I push it up? Do I wipe it off? Or what do we need?
So the reality is like what I do for a living is extraordinarily dangerous.
It sounds like it.
And understanding that danger is a part of what I do every single day. When I walk into work, I am taking people's lives into my hands. And I understand that every single time I clip a carabiner, which I do literally 100 times in an evening probably with all the different things that I have to change and move. I'm taking people's lives into my hands, right? And I don't think that people who buy the equipment off the internet and rig it for their 8-year-old in their backyard like really fully understand the kind of risk that they're taking on for often their children, which makes me very anxious. And so when I students come to me and say, like, I want to buy my own equipment, what should I buy? I first ask why. Because most of the time it's because they want to get stronger. And I'm like, cool, I got a whole bunch of ways I can get you stronger. That is not being on your apparatus. Because the thing about rigging something is that to rig something safely in someone's home, we estimate that it costs at least $3 or $4 grand. You should hire a structural engineer to make sure that your structures are safe. You have to hire a professional rigger to come in and do the rigging safely.
So it's not just
screwing
into the beam and the ceiling.
Exactly,
Gotcha.
exactly. So, and you don't know what reputable companies are selling equipment and who is just like taking some steel they found and benting it in a circle. And we say if you wouldn't hang a car from it, don't hang a person from it.
Huh.
So, most of our equipment is rated about 2,000 pounds.
Yeah, that's that. So my kids have like just a swing, like that we.
This is a perpetual thing because, like, as being the director of the school, the safety is a huge part of my job, and I am very safety conscious as just a human being. Like, I was the kid that was like, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't look safe.
It's a swing that is like. It's a decorative swing. It's not meant for
But my point.
But yeah, it's
my
not.
point
I'm
is
like
that like people
questioning
have
it
been
now,
like
too.
sitting on swings rigged from trees for what 100, 200 years.
Right.
So like there is some level of that is fine, but your kid is probably not going upside down.
Yeah, no.
And the swing isn't
we have
made of
rules.
steel.
No, it is. It is like a crocheted swing, and they're not allowed to swing it.
And
very
like
far.
if it's a silk and they can learn how to climb it from YouTube, then that kid can get 20 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And what people don't know is that some trees lose their limbs like lizards lose their tails. So if there's too much potential damage, it will just drop. So not only are you falling, but you're going to have a tree limb drop on your head.
I mean,
yeah. So, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have swings. Like, I am not that crazy.
no, I don't think you're crazy. I just like talking. I'm like,
I just on top of that, like, if you're going to be training Ariel, you should have a coach that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And a mat.
Have you seen some pretty significant injuries?
I mean, people in my industry die from rigging malfunctions. Our industry, we're not afraid of us failing. I'm not afraid of letting go. I am not afraid of me screwing up. I am afraid of my equipment failing. That's how people die. so understanding like how all of that stuff works super innately is a big part of my job, and a part of like I was at an event where someone else was rigging me, and someone else was taking my rigging down, and I was underneath him like that, and I was like, excuse me? And he's like, oh, I can take it down. And I was like, he's like, you don't need to be here. And I was like, no, my life is in the hands of that piece of equipment. I'm gonna stand right here. Thank you very much. So that's just like, I feel like I like brought the like vibe of the whole room down, but that is, I mean, there's a professional rigger named Brett Copes who is pretty well respected in our industry, and he said, if you don't want to fall, don't get in the air. Mm-hmm. So it's not really an if, it's a when.
Yeah.
And so it's our job as professionals to mitigate that risk for ourselves as much as we can.
Yep.
And then as coaches and instructors to mitigate that risk for our students as much as they can, or as we can. Right. And doing the activity without a coach means you're not going to learn things correctly, and you take your chances of getting injured from doing things incorrectly and just skyrocket. So please find a coach. Come take class.
Right?
That's what I always say.
I think it's important to have the full spectrum of all conversations, so we can never be afraid of having those difficult conversations. So we didn't change the vibe. We were just having an honest, authentic conversation about the risk associated with this phenomenal sport.
Yeah.
It's like they said in the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoons. Kids, we're professionals. Don't try this at home.
Yeah, for real though. For real though.
And the reference is spot on, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in the realm of Kansas City, you said you are part of the Kansas City, the circus,
Yeah, so I primarily work for Kansas City Aerial Arts. That's kind of my home base, where I work as a professional performer and as a coach. And then I also work for like a handful of other companies here in Kansas City. So yes, I work for American Immersion Theater, which you and I work for. So that's like one little piece of my pie. I also work for Quixotic sometimes when they have large scale events. And then I also work for the Kansas City Burlesque Downtown Underground. I'm a member of their company as well. So I work for them quite a bit.
So burlesque, two names I want to ask about, see if you know them. Bob Dorian. Yeah. Unfortunately passed away probably a couple of years ago, but he was pretty big in the burlesque community. Diamond Dan, I think his burlesque name was, but really goofy individual. So that's the first name. Jamie Lynn, or Jamie Pratt.
That name sounds extraordinarily familiar, but I'm not putting a face to it.
Okay, she did a film project with me, and she also happens to be a well-respected local burlesque dancer. So.
Yeah, the burlesque scene in Kansas City is a lot bigger, I think, than people actually realize.
It's
There's
fun.
a lot of burlesque happening in Kansas City.
It's awesome. There should be more. We should talk about it more.
I agree with
it,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. So time goes by really fast. Because it was probably about 12 years ago now, I met a very, very dear friend of mine, Nikki, and she owned Vixen Pinup Photography. And through that venture, kind of had this just beautiful window opened up, because the other women that went to Vixen for photo shoots were oftentimes women in this part of Kansas City scene, this part of the industry, and performance art. And so I got to meet and hear a number of these women, and then kind of just like, I'm performing here on Saturday. It was not a private show, so I was able to get tickets and go. And it's a very neat, as a woman, I think, being able to, it's self-empowered in how we're able to show up and represent ourselves and embody ourselves. And having like positive spaces around those conversations is such a neat thing. And the burlesque scene here really seems to embody that. And I love it.
One of my favorite quotes about burlesque that I have ever found that I really identify with is, burlesque is falling in love with yourself in front of others. And it gives me chills because that's like, it really is so much about my experience with burlesque, and I think a lot of my colleagues' experiences with it as well, is that it's about how good I feel in my own skin, and then letting other people experience that. And it's been really interesting being a coach and having like minors that follow my Instagram. I do have like multiple accounts and things kind of separated, and my burlesque stuff is pushed a lot more towards my stage name and things like that. However, I think that it is important because I spend a lot of my life with a bunch of teenage girls. And I love it. I love my teenagers with my whole heart. Like once they turn 12, I'm like, yes, please come hang out with me. But I think that having positive role models in their lives that they trust and that they look up to and that are living life to the fullest in their true selves is really important to me.
I feel like we should snap to that, or we should clap to that, or we should do all of the things. I completely agree.
This came out of actually a conversation years ago. I was in a show where I was, I'm bisexual. I have known since my early 20s. I came out in 2020. So I have known for an extraordinarily long time, but just wasn't out. And prior to 2020, I was in a show where I was cast in a queer role. And so I interviewed a colleague of mine who was openly queer because I wanted to talk to her about her experience coming out specifically, like what that experience was like, so I felt like I could portray it well. And as a part of that conversation, I came out to her, and she told me, Megan, I don't want you to do something you're not ready for. However, the teenagers around you would benefit from seeing you living your life truthfully. And I wasn't ready yet at that moment, but it never left my brain. And that's really the biggest push of why I came out, and has been a big push on why I live my life the way that I do, because I want those teenagers to see me making the choices that I make so that I'm making the most truthful and authentic choices that I can, so that as they grow and change, I have gotten to I actually got a letter from one of my students who just turned 18, who was like, watching you has impacted my life in these ways, which just was like, it was just like, okay, yes,
everything.
I'm doing the right thing, I'm on the right path, I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing, and so yes, I don't hide from my students that I do burlesque, because I think that it's important that they see that this is an option. It's not the only option. It's not even the best option. It is just like a way that a woman can move through the world and be happy and make money doing it and like all of those things. And so so that's been an interesting experience.
I am a mother of teenage girls and a pre-teenage girl. And this evening in our audience, I told you that my tribe was coming tonight, my besties. And I know, there's a round of applause for the ongoing support, but we have collectively been raising children and teenagers. Our oldest are 1 or 2 years graduated, all the way down to still coming out of elementary. And I also substitute teach. And I am so thankful that we are recording this and that we have the opportunity to continue to share that message, because you are spot on. Being able to connect, we're all in the business of people. It really doesn't matter what business you're in. Ultimately, none of this would exist if it weren't for the other humans that are living in the world. It seems very elementary when you kind of think about it, but for young people to be able to see and interact with real life versions, especially as women, and I have 3 daughters, so my world is very women-centric, but especially as women, being able to kind of change that narrative that women aren't safe with each other, and it's actually quite the contrary. Not everybody's your friend, and sure, that's true, but there's a lot of really powerful things that can happen in safe spaces, and when grown women are able to set that example, young women around us are able to emulate it safely. And it's not a matter of, everybody's your best friend all the time. It's being able to have those difficult conversations without voting people off the island, being able to address those difficult topics, and being able to be open, like you said, about yourself and your struggles, because that becomes the connection piece. That's the part that's oh, I'm a human, you're a human, these are experiences that we share. I'm not alone, and you're not going to shame me for...
Yeah, and I'm extraordinarily close with some of our students, because I've had them for years. I've had some of these kids since they're 8 or 9, right? I've literally watched them grow up. And I work pretty hard that when I'm going through life stuff, that I don't totally keep it to myself. And I find healthy ways of expressing. I had a student find me in the coat closet, or the costume closet in tears once. And I'm okay with that. I am okay with them seeing me have a hard day, or go through a tough life thing, or be in an experience where I get to then teach them this is how we do that thing. This is how we move through the world. This is how we function and do the right thing and all of those things. And I don't plan on having my own children. Because I feel like I get to positively impact so many people, and some of my students are like in their 60s. So it's not just it's
That's
not just
amazing.
teenage girls. It's a lot of teenage girls, but it's not just teenage girls. And I feel like I have so many students that I have seen come through our doors and leave, even if they don't. Not everyone's going to become a professional aerialist or even do it more than a year, but like, getting to come in and understand their body better and understand themselves in space better and believe in themselves more. My favorite thing about my job as a coach is teaching people their own capacity.
I love that.
Often their own capacity for creativity. Because I like early in the process I have this game that I like to play called Where Can We Go From Here? And I will put students in a shape, and then I will tell them to try and figure out where to go from there. And early in the process, they have no idea. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what the other options are. And I tell them, this process is frustrating. Plan on being frustrated for the next 20 minutes. That if you're frustrated, welcome to doing this professionally. Because some days I come to the studio and spend 2 hours and find nothing. So that's just how this works. So I let them be frustrated. And then I say, have you tried everything? Great, you haven't. Keep trying. And then, after about a half an hour of them being frustrated, I will show them where they were headed. They just didn't know it was a destination yet. And I love it because I get to show them you don't know everything. However, you're smart and you're creative and you have the capacity to figure this out on your own. You just don't have all the tools yet. And so I get to start teaching that so early in the process that I get to show other people, adults that don't get to play,
they get surprised by themselves.
They get surprised by themselves. They get surprised that they I can't do it. I'm like, no, go back to where you were, and then do this, move this arm here. Oh my God, look at that! Look at how pretty that is.
That's amazing.
And so I get to help other people find their own capacity for creativity and greatness, and that's my favorite part about my job.
Because our shared experience, of course, is the emergent theater, and the most fun part is you go out into the audience and varying levels of interest in the game or even awareness of the game in different settings, and you start playing and you keep playing, and you start to see people open up and they start to engage, and they're like, oh, this is fun. We're all doing this, okay, and by the end of it, you see people in this version of themselves that is turned on, right?
Well, I think I know this podcast is not about you, but I think we need to talk a little bit about your experience and why you auditioned for American Immersion to begin with. Because you were at a show.
I did.
And you had this experience and then turned around and auditioned for the thing,
That is true. I mean, and that's a short story, Mike. I know the short story is, yes, it was my dad's birthday and there was a murder mystery dinner, and it's the right people is always key.
Sure.
And the hosts of the story were amazing, including Miss Ivy, who's just an incredible person and persona both. But we're there, and they gave me a hat and they gave me a folder, and they're like, okay, here you are. And it was a blast. We had so much fun. I did not even guess the murderer, and I still had so much fun in the entire process that by the end of it, I saw the audition and was like, I want to go do that. So you're absolutely right. I found that joy in something that is play. These are things that if we were to look at with our oftentimes far too critical minds of, what is the productivity here? What is the value? What are you getting from this? I am getting a human experience from this, and by golly, I'm a human, and it turns out that's what I'm supposed to do. So cheers to that, absolutely. So I love it, and I love getting to share space with other just fellow people that like to play.
Yeah, and my play, honestly, is I do ceramics. And I don't.
How much time do we have?
No. Here's the thing. Here's my rule about ceramics: is that I refuse to sell it.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
I will give it away. If you come to my house, you're taking a piece of pottery home. I have too much of it. But it is the one piece of art no one pays for. And if it falls apart, I don't care.
I love
I'm
it.
just
Yeah,
there
it was a
playing.
gift. Yeah. No,
So that's my play now, is that. So even in a job where my job is to put on fairy wings, or one time I crawled across the floor at a wedding, at a satanic wedding. And
Okay.
it was a whole, I am telling you it's been a weird life.
Yeah.
I wear weird costumes. I just have glitter and rhinestones
Everywhere.
I have a walk-in closet, and half of it is clothes, and half of it is costumes. Like, that is my life.
What's your favorite costume?
Ooh. Ooh. That's really tough. The one that I'm wearing on Monday, I bought and have never worn.
Okay.
But I'm extraordinarily excited about it because it fits me really, really well, and it's black and red and like kind of wavy sequins.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a favorite
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Black and red is like one of my
Yeah.
favorite colors.
I have another red one that's like red and super sparkly that I rhinestoned by hand. That is another favorite. I wear that one a lot.
What do you think, Mike? You got any?
I saw the graphic that you made to advertise it. Fire spinning?
Yeah, I also do fire. Yeah, fire is one of the skills. When you work in a circus, you just pick up skills. I also can stilt walk. I don't like it, but I can do it. And so, yeah, I work with fire. And that's actually been a thing I've been doing a lot of recently. I like to call it dancing with fire, instead of like focusing on like fire spinning necessarily,
Right.
because that's just my background and my skill set and the way that I like to entertain. I just like to use the fire as kind of an added element on the things I'm already doing. But yeah, so fire's pretty fun.
Nice. And once again, do not try this at home.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
not
Another
start-
thing. I mean, everything, like all of the things, even including fire, I learned from another professional. So, this is not a thing that I picked up in my backyard either.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah. Do you guys have any questions?
I see a hand over there.
What do the different rings and fillings for your apparatuses do for your performance?
So the different sizes are really having to do with how big your body is and personal preference. So a general rule of thumb is that you should sit inside your lyra, sit up tall, put fist on your head, and that's where the lyra should hit. I prefer mine to be a little bit smaller, and so mine is only about an inch above my head when I sit up tall. So that's mostly just personal preference, and like there are certain skills, if you're more flexible, that you can get away with in a smaller hoop, but if you're less flexible, you might need a bigger hoop to be able to accommodate those things. And then in terms of fillings, it's kind of two things. One, spinning. So we spin really, really fast, and if it's weighted, either because it's solid or filled with sand, the spin will maintain longer because of physics. So if you like to spin fast, or because of what you do, you don't like having to come down and re-spin, then that works well for you. It also makes your spin more consistent because it keeps everything more centralized. The flip side of that is that it's heavy and isn't easy to manipulate. And so a hollow hoop, which is my preference, if it's like this, and then my top fingers is where it's rigged, I can pull on one side and tip it. And so artistically, I like being able to manipulate it in different ways, which doesn't really work with a solid hoop. So those are kind of the pluses and minuses.
Good deal. Any other questions?
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah,
sound
Matt.
like we can see your show during the Fringe Festival.
We don't have a Fringe show this
Okay,
year.
it doesn't sound like-
Kansas City Aerial Arts has done shows in the past. We don't happen to have one this year.
Do you recommend any of the others?
You know what? I haven't sat down to look and see what, there's normally a handful, there's at least a couple
there are
that
several.
come through. And I normally try and figure out how I can at least go see all of them, because I like to support, the other ones. But I haven't seen, we just started Fringe, so I haven't seen any of them yet, so I don't have any good recs yet.
All right. Any other
I know,
questions?
yeah. If you have a question, speak it out loud.
Speak now.
Right on. Mike,
All
do
right.
you got any more questions?
Wait, we have
Wait,
one.
oh, yeah. Mike, I said Mike.
Into burlesque, beyond just auditioning for something like that, like where are there stepping stones to get into that if you were interested in terms of like drag performances or like tryouts? Like what does getting into the burlesque world look like?
So it kind of depends. My path was with Kansas City Burlesque Downtown Underground, they have a festival every spring that has an audition involved. And so I created an act that I felt was appropriate for their show, and then auditioned for that show last year. After the show, the director and I sat down and had a conversation, and then she decided to accept me into their company as a specialty performer. So that's how my path getting into the burlesque company kind of worked. As a general rule in burlesque, you spend time being a kitten before you are a burlesque performer. What being a kitten is, if you've never seen a burlesque show, is that you are responsible for coming out on stage and picking up all of the clothes that have been removed during the acts. It also is a really good opportunity to work on stage presence, to work on improv. Like, I kitten for some of the shows that I'm not in, because I just think it's fun, and I like hang out with the girls, and I like doing the thing. So you come and be a kitten for a couple of years. It's kind of an understudy, apprentice kind of moment. And our kittens are often kind of stage managers too. So they often are setting props and making sure everything's going well backstage and things like that as well. So that's pretty common. And I don't know other companies. I know other companies. There's a company out of St. Louis called the Boom Boom Room that does auditions every September, August, something like that. So it kind of depends upon the company, but most companies you're going to end up being a kitten for at least a little while before you get to be a full-fledged performer. That's just kind of how the industry works.
Nice.
It's so, I just want to point out that the cat's, the cat's bag, the cat's in the bag.
Cats in the, I don't
So
know
you said
what I said.
Hold on, you said, and I was going to write it down and then I didn't. You said, that's a lot of cats in the bag. And then now you get to be a kitten to start out. I'm liking the tones of this. I'm in.
Yeah, it's a fun and playful place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I like it. I like it a lot.
The burlesque underground that you're involved in, do they have public shows?
We do. We have a public show at the Bird every other month. Our next show is August 3rd, and it's actually Heroes and Villains. So I'm doing a Star Wars act and a Marvel act, actually. So those are going to be super fun.
Are you a hero or villain?
So we each have to do 2 acts, and we have to have 1 hero, 1 villain for this show. And so I'm going to do Rey for Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I actually made a replica costume last year, and then got sick before a Heroes and Villains show. So our director texted me, and she's like, I'm giving you first dibs for this show since you couldn't be in it last year. And then I am going to be kind of deep cut, but Agatha.
Yeah.
It was Agatha all along.
And I'm performing to Agatha all along.
I love it.
And I'm doing a chair act for that. So that's my hero and my villain. And then we do the Bird every other month. And then we've been trying to kind of test a couple additional venues in town to see if in the opposing months that we can we're filling that out with some other stuff. So if you're ever interested, it's, I believe, kansascityburlesque.com. Or kcburlesque.com or something like that is the website, and all of our shows coming up are going to be available there, and you can check us out on Instagram and all that fun stuff too. So we have at least 1-ish monthly show with KC Burlesque Downtown Underground.
All right. Well, we only have a couple more minutes left, so thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And
very,
thank
very
you
much.
all for coming.
Yes, thank you guys also.
This has been awesome, except for one technical glitch.
That's all right. It's the first night, at least
It's the
once
first
to be
night,
expected.
we'll figure it out. And yeah, we're back at it tomorrow, 7:30. We got different guests coming up, and we are looking forward to it. So I want to thank Megan.
Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
thank you very much.
As always,
And thank you guys all. Yeah.
good evening. Have a good night.
Have a good night. That was fun. That was fantastic.
This podcast is Uncalled For is hosted, produced and edited by Mike Chernevsky. Opening music for our KC Fringe program is Welcome to Fringe, courtesy of Suno.com. Outro music for our KC Fringe program is Fantasia by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. If you are in the United States or Canada, you can call us at 816-832-5160. Leave your message or question for us, and if we like it, we will play it on the podcast. Please support the podcast and purchase our exclusive Uncalled For merchandise. T-shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, stickers, and so much more. Go to www.cafepress.com/uncalledforpod. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.